Welcome to episode 23 of the RFGeneration PlayCast. This is Grey Ghost 81, and in this episode, Rich, Floyd, Steven, and I will discuss the forgotten gem Folklore on the PlayStation 3. We are thrilled to be joined in our discussion by Pam, who has a great YouTube channel called Cannot Be Tamed. Be sure to check out her videos. Folklore is an action-adventure RPG from early in the PS3 library that is mostly remembered fondly by the people who actually played it. What did we think about it? Does it live up to its cult status, or is it better left unknown? Stay tuned to find out, and as always, all spoilers are in the open. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. You can listen to the show on Podbean and iTunes. As always, don't forget to log on to RFGeneration.com to join our playthroughs and discuss the incredible games we play together. Thank you as always for listening, and now, on with the PlayCast.
So back in our December episode, we talked a little bit about how we kind of regretted playing quite a few like standard AAA third-person shooters. Not because they were bad games, just because they're kind of standard by-the-numbers games, and it feels like we're treading old ground. It feels like we're playing the same games over and over again. So this month we're playing something a little more unique with Folklore. It's a pretty unknown game. Not many people have heard of it. By some accounts, it's considered a hidden gem. Some people would disagree with that, but we're going to talk about it and see what we think. We'll just kind of go around at the end of the episode and get everybody's take on, is this game a hidden gem? Does it live up to that title? So first off, we'll name our participants for this month. I had myself, and of course we're joined by my fellow co-hosts, Rich, Sean, and Floyd. We also had Dougly007 joining us in the playthrough. And we also have our special guest for this month. That is Pam. So welcome to the show, Pam.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
And I think Rich has mentioned a couple times before on this show that you actually have a YouTube channel, correct?
I do, yes. It's called Cannot Be Tamed. And I make all kinds of videos. I do retro game reviews. I do some vlogs, the occasional playthrough of a game. And I've started making lists, which seem to be very popular. So,
yeah, you recently did original PlayStation list? Is that correct?
Yeah, my top 5 games on the PS1.
Yeah, that was a great video.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Pam has a great show. Everyone should, give it a shot and watch it. But be warned, it may hurt your wallet a bit. She tends to review some very expensive games sometimes, and that happened to me with Rule of Rose.
Yeah, I think a lot of people got interested in that one, and it's been just shooting up in price over the last 6 months. Just since I got it, it's gone up over 150 Canadian dollars.
Wow.
Yeah, I was actually lucky to grab that one before the price bubble inflated. I think I paid like $30 for it back in like 2010.
Nice. I paid $0 for mine. I've said this on the air before, but I got my copy of Rule of Rose as a gift from Steven, a surprise gift that I got in the mail, and I lost my mind when I opened it. I mentioned this on the show before.
It wasn't a total gift. I think I kind of owed you a little bit from a previous trade where
Yeah, it was a little bit of trade karma, but our trades are always so lopsided in my favor. I know it was a little bit of generosity on your part. So anyway,
back to Folklore. Folklore was developed by Game Republic, which is unfortunately no longer in existence. I believe Game Republic was founded, maybe, or at least he was involved with it. A guy by the name of Yoshiki Okamoto, if I'm pronouncing that right. He used to work at Konami and Capcom and worked on series such as Final Fight and Street Fighter. No, and then I don't know what he's doing now. Of course, it was published by Sony. It's an exclusive for the PlayStation 3. It was released in 2007. And the game had very mixed reviews when it came out. Some people loved it. Some people hated it. Some people had a very middle-of-the-road opinion on it. Interestingly enough, there was a sequel planned for this game. It was going to be either a PSP game or possibly a downloadable Move title. But that idea got canned because the game didn't sell very well. The original Folklore did not sell well, so they didn't greenlight the sequel. And I'm glad there was no Move title, because I don't think there are any good Move titles. And we're going to talk about it. This game does have some motion controls, and I couldn't imagine if the game was entirely nothing but the motion controls, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
The story it takes influences from Irish mythology, and I don't know if any of you guys have anything to add to that, or maybe if you're familiar with Irish mythology.
I'm not very familiar. I'm familiar with, Greek, Roman mythology, even, like Norse mythology. I have a pretty good grasp on, but not Irish mythology. I mean, probably the only thing I know is like leprechauns, right?
which I don't think there were any in this game.
That's all I can name. No,
Surprisingly.
no, they're not.
Yeah.
It's probably just an American convention.
Could be.
We probably made leprechauns up at some point.
I was actually surprised to see that this game was set in like the modern day. It was actually set in the year it was released, 2007, and the town that you explore, which is Doolin, Ireland, which I found out was actually a real place. Yeah.
Oh, really?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I mean, it's not the same as it is in the game, but yeah, it looks very rustic. It looks, I mean, most of the time I was thinking this game took place in like the early 1900s or maybe the 1800s, but no, it's 2007.
It's a very small town. I mean, it's not big. I mean, but I guess it's got all you need, right? It's got a lighthouse, it's got a pub, and it's got a church, and that's all you need, right, to have a full functioning village.
Yeah.
It's kind of like those towns that really haven't changed for like 100 or 200 years.
Yeah.
Right. You do get that feeling.
It's a small, remote village, and there's very little technology there. I think they show one TV in the game, and that TV looks like it's from the 80s.
Well, it does have a VCR, so yes.
Are you sure it's not a Betamax?
Could be.
So we have our main characters, Ellen and Keats. Ellen is a young girl. I think she's about 20 or 22. She's a college student. She receives a letter from her mother, who she believes to be dead, asking her to come to the village of Doolin. And our other character, Keats, is a writer for a magazine that writes, it's like an occult, supernatural magazine. He's just looking for a next big lead. He receives a phone call. Somebody seems desperate for help, asking him to come to Doolin. They say the fairies are trying to kill them. So he's just following up on this lead. Ellen and Keats sort of meet up at the top of this cliff where they witness a dead body falling to the beach below. Ellen believes it to be her mother. But it's not. I actually forget who that was. Drawing a blank here.
Suzanne's mother.
Yeah, that was Suzette's mother. Yeah,
that's what. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, when they get to the beach below, the body's just not there. They can't find it. But that's the setup for our story. Ellen's just trying to figure out her past and look for her mother, and Keats is, trying to follow up on this lead. His magazine is titled Unknown Realms, which, interestingly enough, was the working title of Folklore. They kept it for the name of the magazine. You switch back and forth between the characters throughout the game, so you'll play each chapter with both characters. You're swapping back and forth. You get to see the game from both perspectives. Ellen is guided by a character named Scarecrow, and Keats is guided by this other character named Belgi. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Something like that.
Yeah. something like that.
It works for me.
Yeah,
Balaj or something like that. I'm not sure. He's sort of a
yeah, he looks like Phantom of the
if you will.
Opera.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
but he's like a
he's
invisible
dandy.
man kind of thing too.
He's definitely a dandy. I mean, he's got his his derby hat and spectacles.
that
but
puffy
sort of
shirt.
like the invisible. Yeah. But and he's always carrying a book
Mhm.
too. He's always holding that book out, which is very strange. But
Yeah, and you find over the course of the game, it seems like they start having like opposing motives. It starts to feel a little adversarial at times. But you're kind of kept in the dark for a while. You're not really sure what the true motive of each guide is. That sort of unfolds throughout the game. A little bit of a detective narrative. You're trying to solve a murder mystery. And then the cutscenes are kind of odd in this game in that there's a few different ways that they present them to you. You have some fully voiced CGI cutscenes, which unfortunately are kind of underutilized. There's just a handful of these full motion cutscenes with actual voice acting. There's very little voice acting in the game, which is kind of a shame because it was pretty well done.
yeah, I think that's something you and I went back and forth about this game. It's the cutscenes are really beautiful. I like the way they're set up. I like the comic book style. But and I like all the voice acting. It's very good, but it seems like there just isn't enough of it, and it seems odd that that when there is voice acting and it's voiced, it's really great, but when it's not there, it's quiet and it seems out of place. It seems very, very odd. Floyd, didn't you do a little research on that or find something out about that? And you'd mentioned something about maybe it wasn't in the budget or
Yeah,
that was
I'm
sort of a speculation.
I'm assuming that, aside from the first fully acted cutscene that you get at the beginning, which is fairly standard in games, but sort of everything after that was I don't know, half animated, I almost want to say.
Yeah.
And it turns out it was just a budget thing. I think we did some research into this, and the scope or the ambition of this game was quite larger than what the final product really was. So
Right.
maybe maybe the bigwigs at the top kind of said, tone it down, or who knows, maybe they kind of ran out of resources and had to start dialing things back, which is unfortunate because a lot of the things in this game work really well. And
I agree.
yeah, those are kind of blemishes that it has.
Right. Well, just kind of getting back to the story, I guess we talked about this being sort of a detective narrative, and Pam, I want to get your thoughts on just the story and kind of what your thoughts were on the story, and sort of how it developed through the game.
I initially really liked the story. I mean, it wasn't anything particularly... I mean, beside the Netherworld stuff, the sort of Doolin narrative is pretty standard, detective story stuff. But I did like that they added the fairies in there. That sort of added something interesting, although I don't think they totally stuck the landing on that one, how it came together. But the story was pretty good. At first, I enjoyed that you got to experience as both Ellen and Keats, though after a while I thought that sort of started to wear out its welcome.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the repetitiveness of the gameplay as far as, having to transverse the same areas, twice, which I'm sure is something we're going to get into a little later. But, yeah, I mean, that sort of made it drag. In terms of the story, though, you would get different sides of the story, and you would see where the story overlapped, and I like the way they did that. You would see the story, or experience maybe the same cutscene from
a different
Keats' angle. Right, and then just kind of see how those kind of mesh together. I don't know how the rest of you played the game, but as I played as Keats second and Ellen first.
That's what I did.
So I played as her, and then him, and I would just alternate. You could you do have the option of playing up to through level 6, is that right? With one character, and then going back and doing it with the other character if you'd like. I don't think you have to alternate.
Yeah, I did that for 1. Like, I did Ellen 2 and 3 before I did Keats chapter 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How did that work? Did you just find that like alternating just seemed to make the story go better? I think maybe I might get a little confused if I didn't go back and forth.
Yeah, it got a little more confusing and harder to remember the previous chapters going out of order, but it also made it feel a little bit less repetitive. So
Right. I think one of the things that you had mentioned was that the detective story in town was sort of standard fare. It was a little simple, and then the more elaborate story probably was what was going on in the folk world, and then you had to kind of pull it together to make sense of it all. I think what really kept me going in the game, playing the game, and really enjoying it, and kind of pushing me to go from chapter to chapter was the actual story in the town.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what it was. It did seem very standard, but anytime you have like an unsolved murder or something like that, and you're trying to figure it out, I think they did a good job of presenting that, giving you just enough between every chapter to make you sort of want to play the game more.
Yeah, I agree that I think it was just pulled together better in the town, whereas in the Netherworld, though the story was a little bit more unique, you didn't really know where anyone was coming from, like the Fairy Lord and Levane. You didn't know what their motives were exactly, It was a little bit nebulous.
Right, and that's that's the part of the game that I liked as well. You didn't know, like, there were times I was like, well, I don't know if I can trust the Fairy Lord, and there were times where, like, I don't know if I can trust Keats, and Levan. I didn't know if I could trust her or not. She seemed like a very sinister character, from the beginning of the game, only because I guess, you're playing as Ellen. You typically think when you're playing as the hero or the heroine that, whatever their motives are, you're okay. You're safe in doing that, and whatever whatever they're progressing toward as far as an outcome. But I got to sort of like the first few chapters in the game, and I started questioning, am I working for the wrong side? With each character, I couldn't figure it out, and that was a really neat concept of the game, and I thought they did that very well in this game. How about you guys, Stephen, Floyd, Sean?
I felt like both of these characters, particularly Ellen, were actually, really being manipulated by the Fairy Lord, because he is so kind of vague that, you do kind of think that he's got some motives that he's not being totally open about. And I just wanted to say that I think it's interesting that you found the Doolin plot scenarios more interesting, or at least more gripping, because it was the total opposite for me. I was not interested in what was going on in the town at all, because it felt so lifeless. And I think if there was more happening in the town, like if there were people walking around, I would be more interested and motivated to see what's going on. I kind of just would start each chapter, find out who I have to talk to or what I have to do to trigger the Netherworld portal, and I was really more gripped by what was happening in the Netherworld. And I think it's partly because the Fairy Lord and Levane were kind of nebulous, like Pam already said, and they're at least to me, their stories and the story of what's happening in the Netherworld, how it's falling apart, and you have to get to the core, was for me more interesting, and that's what really kept me going.
Yeah, I can understand that. I guess I looked at it from a kind of an opposite angle, in that there being so few people in the town, you knew one of them had to be the murderer, right? So that kind of limitation made me more curious, as far as if the town was full of people and more people, I would not have been as curious. if that makes
Well,
sense.
no, that does, because you were probably coming in with more of like a detective mindset,
Yeah.
and I was
Right,
coming in with
exactly.
like, the mentality of like, what does Ellen want to discover here?
Right,
Like I was
right.
more behind Ellen than anyone else in this story.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
I side with Rich on this one. I should probably disclose right now that I didn't come even close to finishing the game. I couldn't get past the Eol boss.
He was a pain in the butt.
I tried and tried and
Yeah.
tried, and some things you just can't do. So, but
I threw a few controllers.
yeah, and I enjoyed the town parts a lot more than the NetherRealm parts, because it reminded me kind of like I want to say like mid to late 2000s adventure type game, because it's talking to people. This is like the RPG feel to it, and also the aesthetic of the town kind of reminded me of like a Silent Hill game, as opposed to like the whimsy of the NetherRealm. So I'm with you, Rich. I found the town stuff to be a lot more interesting.
No, the whimsy goes right out the door after chapter 3.
Well, yeah, I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage for this discussion, unfortunately, but
you still bring a really good point to the table. So and that's why we're happy to have you here.
Yeah, and
Thanks.
you played a good bit of it too. I mean, you played a good bit of it too. I mean, making it as far as you did up to that point, which I think for all of us was a pretty frustrating part of the game. I think Floyd had an easier time with it than a lot of us, and it's kind of strange. I just wanted to mention because people don't really know what goes on behind the scenes, but typically when we're playing games, we all text each other. The four of us text each other and kind of go back and forth. This was the most interactive game that we've ever had.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned that, didn't you, Sean?
yeah, that chat was just going nuts at certain points.
It wasn't always positive, but
No, but there was a lot of like we were helping each other out a lot, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
I think more than we've ever done with like
Right.
basic strats, and we'll get into the folk like gameplay, the Pokemon kind of gameplay, and like who to use, and yeah, we went over a lot of stuff in our chats with each other. It was really cool.
Yeah. It probably, I think our chats kept me away from watching any playthroughs of the game, so which was really nice. I felt like it was the 80s again, and I was calling my buddies up on the phone about, hey, I finally made it past this point, or hey, what did you use to get past this point, and it really felt like old times again, which was really nice. And I think that's a big part of us, only doing one game now. We're going to probably do this a lot more and have a lot more fun with this. Sort of back and forth, which will be nice, I think. So, anyone else have anything they want to talk about as far as the story was concerned? Anything that really stood out, you liked or disliked about it?
Well, there was a plot twist somewhere in there that there's a young girl in the game that you see named Cecilia who is instrumental to the whole murder mystery that happened like 17 years ago or whatever in the game. And you find out that that's actually your main character, Ellen. Like everybody in the village believes Cecilia to be dead, but it turns out that no, her mother sent her off somewhere, and Ellen just has these repressed memories. She doesn't remember anything from that time, and I think me and Floyd called that one. We said it was pretty predictable.
Oh, really? I didn't see it. Oh, I did know that she was the girl. I did figure that out pretty quick. I mean, they look very similar too. What I didn't catch the sort of the addition of that plot twist, which was and by the way, Pam, we don't care about spoilers on the show. Which was the additional twist of everyone thought that she was the murderer. She's the one that had murdered the people of the town or been a part of it.
Yeah,
So,
I remember those. There's like the cutscenes where it shows like the man trying to attack her, and like it makes it look like she pushed the man off the cliff, and I was like, I don't think I'm buying that. Well, the 5-year-old girl pushed the man off the cliff. So I mean, I knew there was like somebody else, and
Yeah, they kind of try to mislead you with that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right. Which is nice. I mean, that's a nice addition to the story. I thought, I like it when a story tries to mislead you a little bit and kind of toys with you, which I thought was good. I don't know, maybe the only one.
No, I agree.
No, I liked it too.
And wasn't there a second plot twist as well?
You find out that the boy from the past, name is Hervé, was Cecilia's friend. He had a terminal illness, and he died, this 17 years ago in the story. And you find out that he's like kind of, sort of Keats. It gets a little convoluted here, but he's
Because at one point, weren't they like in a room together? They were talking together or something.
Yeah, but it's
and there's the drawing
exactly, yeah,
too,
the
at
drawing.
end,
Yes,
which
yeah.
is very strange.
It's
just very strange. I couldn't put
like,
that together,
yeah,
but now that you
like,
say that,
I think the game drives the point home that Hervé did die. So it's not. So Keats isn't actually Hervé, but he's like a manifestation of an adult Hervé out of Ellen's mind or something like that because of the drawing.
There's some
or
sort
some
of
psychic
spiritual connection.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. How about you, Pam? What did you think about that? I mean, did you catch on to that, or did you have any thoughts about the connection between Keats and Hervé?
I totally did not see that twist coming. That was a bit of a surprise, and I'm actually glad it was something like that, because a lot of the time in the story I was thinking, like, why is Keats even here? I mean, Ellen is clearly the protagonist and it's her story, and Keats is just, some guy who works at a magazine, and I didn't really understand his purpose a lot of the time. So it is good that he was actually involved in the story more.
Yeah. He was like a David Duchovny character.
Yeah.
If you will. Sorry, I've been obsessed with X-Files
Just because we're watching
recently.
all this X-Files right now. But like Keats became super integral towards the end.
Mm-hmm. Sure did. And, sort of as acted as sort of Ellen's guardian. And like you guys were talking about this story, I could never tell, like, if Keats was going to be sort of adversarial toward Ellen. I thought at some point, I was like, oh man, these guys are going to go edit it.
That's what I expected.
They really hint at that. They try to make you think that's what's going to happen, but I think at some point Keats, he really opens up Ellen's eyes and shows her that the fairy lord is just manipulating her, and they I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Well, I think in defense of the fairy lord, because he wanted to remove the spear in like the tree of life kind of thing.
Yeah,
and that would kind of bring the real world into just like a state of bliss or something. Like they would never know sadness, they would never know pain and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and Ellen decides that, like, no, feeling sadness and feeling pain and loss and all that stuff is what makes us human, and that's why I'm going to leave the spear in the tree, because life is all about obstacles and overcoming them, and that's ultimately what makes humans and what makes people better people.
I wonder if that the whole tree scene, I wonder if that has anything to do with, I would be curious if that has anything to do with Irish folklore or mythology in that sense. I mean, it's very Judeo-Christian as well. You get that sort of feeling, you've got the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, right? And so, with the tree of knowledge, once that's eaten from, you can't ever go back, and that's where fear and death come into the world. So it's very similar to that. Just wanted to sort of point that out.
I think the only Irish thing I was missing was a Claddagh ring. I think that's how you pronounce it. The ring with the hands and the heart and the crown.
Oh, yes.
That's the only Irish thing I was missing.
Yeah, it was good, though. I mean, there's some good music in the game, I thought. If we want to kind of maybe talk about that next, and kind of like to hear what everybody kind of thought about the music.
Yeah, I thought the soundtrack was great. There's a lot of little piano melodies with violins, and it has a very like fantastical, supernatural kind of feel to it. The soundtrack was definitely a highlight for me.
Yeah, you get the pitchiness with the violins sometimes when it gets exciting, and then there's other times when the music's very sort of fantastical. It reminds me of I'm sure you guys know who Danny Elfman is.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of the music sort of like it almost seemed like it took from that style, or they were trying to mimic that style. Which if you're going to mimic a style, I mean, what better style to mimic than that? I mean, he's fantastic.
Probably, yeah, because there was a lot of pieces that had like a lot of pomp. Yeah.
Yes, and that kind of
yeah,
it's kind of
that's all warm and
sound.
fuzzy.
You know what I'm talking about. I really dug the music in this game. I thought it was really well done. I thought, with the action sequences, the music would speed up, with the boss battles and things like that. It got really intense. And so everything seemed to, very, to fit sort of, very well, with the music.
Yeah, like the music in the village was sort of doomy and haunting. So it kind of gives you the impression that something's not right there. And,
right.
Another little thing about the music was, the music would pick up in volume, and I think it would change to like the battle theme when enemies spotted you. But if you, because you have the option to avoid combat, it would sort of fade back into the level music, which I thought that was a nice touch.
Right. Yeah, it's good. I mean, it shows you that they really paying attention to the game and working in, both their, sort of the action with the music, and not just, just sort of ignoring that and just playing like one tune throughout, which was nice.
Yeah, it's more than just being there.
Yeah. So how about, I guess we should move on and talk a little bit about the graphics in the game, and, so,
yeah. Oh yeah, it's just another highlight for me. I feel like this game kind of has a unique art style. I'm not really sure what you would call it, but it's not like anime. It's not like very realistic, but it's very colorful, and it looks really good. Like, I think this game that came out almost 10 years ago looks better than a lot of the games I've been playing, recent releases. Played Fallout 4 recently, and this game is much more appealing to look at than something like that. Again, just another highlight.
Yeah. I mean, the color palette for this game is fantastic. Lots of purples, lots of pinks, lots of bright colors in the fairy world. But in each individual stage, it's sort of highlighted by, different colors, the underwater scenes.
They're very
for instance,
blue.
a lot of blues, of course, and green to fit. But it's very... I don't say neon, but it borders sort of like right on the edge of almost being, neon, but not.
Yeah, I can kind of see that.
Really brightens up your TV. Yeah, it really brightens up your TV, and it looks great. As someone who hasn't played a lot of newer games, I just found this to be probably the most beautiful game I've played, so far. In relation to like color, in that sense. Pam, Sean, you have any thoughts on the art style of the game?
Yeah, I have to agree. One of the things that really turned me on, I was really high on this game when I started it, before I, got slammed by the eel boss. And one of the things that blew me away, like within my first hour of playing, was the amazing lush detail of the environments and the graphics. Like, not just the colors are amazing, and there's just a vast range of colors, but there's some intricate details in the backgrounds that I was really surprised to see from such an early PS3 game. And I really like environments in games that look like you can kind of just stop and look at them for a minute. It's hard to explain, but I just call them like stop and look around moments. And I found a lot of those actually in the town, like when you went in somebody's house and there was no music, it's quiet, especially if there wasn't another character there. Just to look around, the detail they put in some of those houses was kind of amazing. and you could just kind of look at the objects in the house, and it feels like they all felt like places where people could actually live or did actually live. So not just the lush, colorful. Again, the game is so diametric in this amazing lush colorfulness of the netherworld, but then also this like sparse, cold, lived in stark environment of these little houses in Doolin. That really like caught my attention.
Awesome. Pam, did you have any thoughts on the art style?
Yeah, I really liked the art style. It was colorful and it was attractive. The graphics were pretty good for early PS3. I did find that the sort of graphic novel kind of style for some of the cutscenes, I really liked those at first, and then after a while, they sort of lost their charm for me. Like, they felt a little bit empty. I wish they had a little more voice acting with them, or some more animation.
Yeah, it was. It would be sort of that sort of freeze frame almost animation where you would just get like a picture and the camera would kind of move, with the picture, but there was no there was no animation or no action or anything like that. And it was sort of bordered by this this sort of frame. It was kind of framed in with this sort of from what I remember, was it like leaves or something like that, sort of cross-hatching?
Yeah, it was very earthy and leafy.
Look. Yeah, which is sort of odd. And I think that I can't remember who said it. We were kind of texting back and forth, but somebody said it. Sometimes you couldn't tell who was saying what.
Yeah,
I had that problem a couple times.
Yeah, I remember thinking that, because there'll be multiple characters on the screen, and there's a bubble. They're just text bubbles, and it's not clear like who's saying it. I think there were even instances where there were multiple characters in a room, but it's showing like a part of the room and no characters are standing there, and it's like there's somebody from like out of the frame is supposed to be talking, so there's just like a bubble, and you have really no idea who's supposed to be saying those words. Yeah, it's a little weird.
Yeah, you'd have to sort of, thank goodness, one of the things I did like about those scenes was you could actually rewind them, and you could fast forward them if you wanted to. I mean, you really didn't want to do that, but you could actually, once you got to the end of sort of a frame, you could actually rewind, and if something didn't make sense, you could probably put it together, because some of the frames would just go by really fast, and you wouldn't be able to catch everything. And so I thought that was a nice addition to that portion of the game. I like being able to do that in case I missed part of the story, to help me sort of put it together a little bit better. So I did appreciate that, at least in that portion. But I'm like the rest of you guys. I just wish that there would have been a lot more voice acting. I think it would have. I think they had tremendous voice actors, and if they would have utilized that a lot more, it would have been so much better.
I can live with the little amount of voice acting that was in there, and I do like the comic book scenes. Like, they were really creative, really unique. Like, I don't think there's too much out there at the time that was doing it. But what I really didn't care for was the just like 2 character models and then speech bubbles. I found that really dull, I guess, really simple. And especially when the conversation got really heated, and then the characters would just have such weak animations.
Yeah, I felt like that was, the most boring and dull of the various different styles of cutscenes in the game.
Yeah, like that felt like reading, whereas the comic books didn't feel so much like reading. It was more like I was reading, but I was like uncovering the story and like getting deeper into the mystery.
Yeah.
When you talk about the characters' animations, one of the things that really started bothering me was that Ellen's default pose was sort of cowering, like hunched over, mouth open, hands in front of her face. That was her reaction to everything.
Just defeated, confused, bewildered, which I guess, I guess it makes sense, considering the game and, her being someone who doesn't, know what her past was or can't remember her past and is trying to, sort of dig that up. But it was a little much. And I agree with that. It was a little much to have that as sort of like her default pose. And you can push that with the story. You don't have to necessarily do all that with the, the body language with the character.
And it felt kind of anime tropey also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it made her seem weaker than what she was. I mean, and she's such a strong character in the game that I don't think there was any need for that. I mean, I'll be honest, and we can go ahead and get into some gameplay, but I really enjoyed playing with her more than I did Keats, and I don't know that there was. There were a few differences, but for whatever reason, I just sort of enjoyed her character a little more.
Yeah, I think they play very, very similarly, but I think one of the biggest differences is that when Ellen summons one of the folks, she actually summons it in front of her, so the folk can take the hit for her, and it makes her seem a little more defensive. Whereas Keats sort of, it's almost like he's still attacking himself, but utilizing the power of the folks.
They're an extension of him,
exactly,
kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's a lot easier to avoid taking damage as Ellen, which I think makes it a little easier to play as her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd mentioned that before, and I think, Floyd, you might have said you didn't kind of see that, or you didn't kind of agree with that, but that, her character seems to be a little more defensive, as we were kind of talking about. Keats' and character seems be a little more offensive, because I guess we should sort of mention that Keats has this ability called Transcendence, which is just this sort of meter that builds up, and once it fills all the way up, you can sort of activate it by pushing down the thumbsticks, and you can just go to town,
right?
pretty much. I mean, you're pretty much unstoppable.
No, you are unstoppable.
Yeah, you're invincible and all that.
Yeah,
during that phase.
Right, which is kind of it's kind of neat.
To me, both of them felt offensive, unless you were using a shield type.
Right.
But Ellen kind of felt like she could attack from a little bit of a greater range, even with close range folks, because the folks kind of did the fighting for her, and because Keats kind of uses the folks as an extension of him, so he would sort of get into closer combat. I actually had the most game overs with Keats, actually.
Okay, that's interesting. I don't think I really paid attention. I probably had the most with Ellen, only because I had to fight that eel boss so many times with her, to the point of just wanted to rage quit, but not doing it, trying to push it.
I was actually fine with freezing the tail and then using the slash guy, and Keats was, I think, freezing and then lightning or something, and I kept missing with lightning.
Yeah. Oh, really? Oh, wow. It's a completely opposite experience for me.
I think this whole time is like
some others.
We're going to be opposites to each other.
Yeah. So I guess we should kind of talk a little bit about the gameplay and controls. It's a third person action sort of RPG. You do level up. I don't know that I really noticed in the game that my character got any stronger, if there was any sort of benefit of leveling up. Did you guys? I mean, is there any sort of benefit to
nothing
it?
that I actively noticed, but if you press the select button, it brings up a menu that shows you some information, and every time you level up, your HP does go up slightly. But it wasn't...
And refills.
Okay.
It does refill, yes. It refills, and it actually, the maximum value increases. But it wasn't something that I really noticed. Felt a little tacked on to me, actually.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of those things in the game that sort of feel tacked on, and I agree that's sort of one of them. I guess the other thing about this game is that you basically, as Sean mentioned, I'll probably let him sort of talk about it a little bit. You mentioned something about the sort of Pokemon aspect to this game. If you want to talk about that a little bit and how that works into the gameplay.
Yeah, sure. So the enemies that you fight are known as folks, and you basically pummel them until their spirit, or it's called the id, turns red, right? It turns from blue and then red. Am I correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so when it turns red, you can do this like Ghostbusters,
That's
That's a
perfect.
great description.
yeah, it's a lot. That's what it reminded me of. It's like this electric lasso kind of thing that looks like the Ghostbusters proton packs that you can kind of rope the folk in and gain their powers, and that's where the motion controls come in. And I guess we could talk about that. I didn't have a problem. Rich, I know you had a lot of issues with these motion controls, which I tend to in general. I don't like motion controls very much at all, unless it's like a light gun game, if that even counts. But here you have to, most of the time you're just kind of like jerking the controller up in the air like quickly. But then with the bosses, there's different maneuvers you have to do, like steering the controller or flicking it at the right time. It can be, I mean, for the most part, for me, in my experience, it worked pretty well. I have more complaints about the camera than I do the motion controls. But Rich, I know you weren't a huge fan of those, but yeah, so that's the folk system. And how it's related to the motion controls there. So when you beat the folk and you basically inherit their powers, and there's dozens of them from each world, and they all have elements, and the elements correspond with weaknesses of certain characters, and that's where most of our chatting and texting with each other was like, who do I use to beat this guy? What element is that? Where did you get that, folk? You know what I mean? That's where all the strategy, I guess you can call it, kind of comes into play.
Yeah. I got better at the motion controls. I started to enjoy them a little bit more. I don't know if it was an issue with my controllers or anything like that from damage of being thrown around. I'm kidding, but yeah, I did. I had some problems. The one of the most aggravating was the one where you had to like tilt the controller and get it like to the center.
Yeah,
and it would, that was the most aggravating one for me.
For me, the most aggravating, the dumbest one was, I think it was called Stop and Go. And you have to shake the controller so violently, and then you stop, and then you shake,
That
and you
was
stop.
worse for me too.
and they use that one a lot too late in the game. It was annoying.
Yeah. And what were some of the others Sean mentioned was the it would sort of be up, it'd be kind of blue, it'd be up really high, and it would kind of bounce down, and once it bounced down, you had to like pop up on the controller. That one wasn't so bad, and that was basically the technique that you used to capture most of the sort of the general folks, and not just the folklore that you fought. So,
there was kind of like the whacking side to side.
I actually like that one.
That was
the
a
most,
fun one, because that one would go the fastest.
Yeah.
You can just slam them around.
I didn't like that balancing one too much, but it wasn't used a lot, so
yeah. I was glad that wasn't used a lot, and the final boss you have to use all of them, don't you? From what I remember,
I think so.
Yeah. It just sort of integrated them all, it's kind of neat.
But I like that idea that the motion control was sort of trying to represent, which was like you're kind of wrestling with their with their spirits.
Yeah. It was good, and I think I'd mentioned at one point this game, I liked it, and it was okay, but I probably would have just preferred like a button mashing sequence, or something like that. I don't know. I'm kind of, maybe I might have to back off of that statement a little bit, but at one point in the game I sort of felt that way. But
what's worse, these motion controls or QTEs?
Yeah, see now you're bringing up that.
These motion.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, that's my.
I would
my
rather
opinion.
do a motion. I would rather do a motion control to capture the folks.
Yeah.
Pam, what did you think about these controls? And do you like motion controls in general? It's a very, I guess, acquired taste.
No, I don't like motion controls at all. I feel like they've never really added anything to a game. I think there's one game I thought motion controls added something to the game.
Can you say what game? Is it Wii Bowling? Wii Sports Bowling?
No, it was
Rain.
Oh,
Heavy
cool.
Rain.
Agreed. Yeah,
Oh,
good
that's
point.
one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And see, I haven't
Yeah.
played that yet. I want to play that. We're gonna have to do that for a playthrough at some point. But when we played Indigo Prophecy, the QTEs just drove me nuts.
Yeah. They're not
But
good
someone
at
said, well, you need to play Heavy Rain. They do it better. You know,
They kind of perfected it by the time Heavy Rain came around.
Yeah,
But it would
so
be
that
weird to,
intrigues
like,
me.
Twist the thumbstick to open the door.
Yeah. So that intrigues me that it also has motion controls. I had no idea. So that's really neat.
So in Folklore, I was initially very put off the first time I was told to flick my controller upwards. I eventually got used to it, and I don't know, I didn't find the motion controls so bad by the end, although I did find that stop and go shake the controller one fairly annoying, especially since it seemed to stop more than go.
Oh, yeah.
Like I would just be sitting there waiting for it to start again. And I also would have been completely lost without clicking the right stick for the tutorial, because with the bosses, as we said, that just keeps changing the method.
I relied on that a lot too.
Yeah.
Which was nice that they put that in the game, at least, right? I mean, that they had the tutorial. I did like that, and I thought that was a good use. But yeah, I think at one point, I called the controls. This isn't 6-axis; it sucks axis. Controls.
It's on our Twitter.
Yeah. So, it was annoying at first. I got used to it, and it got better. But I don't think my family ever got past the point that I was a madman playing a video game. My wife would just she would be sitting there reading a book while I'm playing, and I would catch her eyes like look over at me and just her shaking her head, from side to side. It's like, what is going on in our living room? But it was fun.
I'll tell you that I was relieved when I found that you can just sort of flick your wrist to catch the minor folks. Yeah. Like I thought you really had to like swing the thing. We can just kind of flick your wrist, so that made it a lot easier.
I don't know if I missed something, but was there a way once you locked on to something with R1 to like cancel?
You had to get hit, I think.
Yeah.
You had to get hit. Okay, because I got annoyed by that a lot at the end when I would latch onto something that I thought was something that I just had to flick for, but it ended up being something I had to do something more involved, and then I would just be sitting there doing it, knowing something was going to hit me before I finished.
Agree. There should have been a way to break that. I don't know if there was, but if there was, great. That was a good thing they did. But if not, it was annoying. It's something.
I didn't find anything like that. I just noticed you'd get a few invincibility frames right after absorbing an id. But for the more like involved absorptions, like the stop and go or the bouncing side to side, I couldn't come out of that absorption thing. I had to get hit to get out. So
right. I couldn't find a way to break it either.
No.
Yeah.
I want to add, I'm curious how y'all did with, since we're talking about capturing the folk and the motion controls, and we mentioned the kind of half-baked RPG mechanics that if you capture more than one folk at the same time, your experience that you get multiplies. And I'm wondering, like, I had mixed results trying to get more than one at a time, and sometimes they come at you in droves, so it was kind of fun to pummel like a bunch of them with a heavy folk and then try to rope in as many as you could at once. But then a lot of times that aforementioned crummy camera made it really hard to, and you could only do it at like, let's say maybe like probably like a 90-degree-ish angle,
anything within like a 90-degree angle from your character.
Right.
And I think that folk had to be within the field of view of the camera as well. So yeah. Perhaps a limitation of not knowing how to use the hardware or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And you would have to set up those battles too if you wanted to pull more than one in at a time. You'd have to set up. I got to a point where, and I think we mentioned that really in this game, experience didn't matter that much. Something that just sort of felt a bit tacked on, and leveling
Right.
up. So I didn't really care if I got more than one at a time. There wasn't any added benefit in my opinion, and it's more than grabbing more than one.
We might have mentioned it already, but it did make your health bar a little bit larger, right? When you leveled up?
Oh, did it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we
when you
mentioned that
leveled
on the
up. Yeah,
forum.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there was a little bit of an incentive to kind of hunt for experience and try to get that multiplier up. But like I said, I had fun with it at first, and then experienced such mixed results just because of the camera and the range and everything that it was. I almost felt like it was a little bit flawed in execution. A cool idea, but almost like this whole game, a cool idea that was flawed in execution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It took me a while to get used to the camera too and other aspects of the game. But yeah, I wanted to sort of, gosh, I had a thought, and I hope it didn't escape me. Pam had brought up about the folk and how you would have to get hit to break, that lock on. One of the things that was with the characters that were more involved to capture, if you were in a room with multiple characters, it just seems like a lot of times there's two ways you could defeat folk, right? You could capture them each time if you wanted to, or you could just pummel
Just
them,
downright
and they
defeat
would,
them. Yeah.
Right, downright defeat them, which plays into other aspects of the game, which I know we're going to talk about.
I didn't know you could do that until like almost the end.
Right. And they don't really tell you that unless you're trying to level up your folk. But a lot of times you would have to make this sort of choice as far as, okay, I want to capture this one, but there's no way I can capture this one with these other folk in the room, so I'm just going to have to either take out the ones that are less involved and do a quick flip and absorb those, or if there were two in the room that were two of those more involved folk, you would just have to take out one.
I just ran past
and
them.
then just capture the other. So I thought the game sort of, it's kind of interesting. The game sort of made you make those choices sometimes, and I started kind of putting that together toward the end and playing a little bit better and understanding, what the actions were going to be and what it would take to get through a certain area.
So what that point that you just brought up reminded me of, in Endless Corridor, where you kind of have to go through those little mini gauntlets. It would be like capture this folk first or capture it last.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So would you guys defeat the non-important folks and then capture the one you actually needed to? Or because what I did is if I had to capture like the folk last and they were like those tougher guys, I kind of got them all to that point where the ids would be coming out, and then just absorb the one I needed.
Well, there's two different scenarios, right? There was the first where you go in and it says capture this one folk, and that's the only one.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just go straight for that folk and do it, and I thought that was pretty easy. That folk was usually fairly easy to take down, and once you took that one down, the other ones would just disappear, and the door would appear. For the other ones, I would just try to avoid, if I was to capture a certain folk last, I would just try to avoid that folk and just take out the other guys. And typically I wouldn't absorb them. I would just try to beat them down, just to get them out of the way, just so that, nothing would hit me. And, because I felt that those levels were kind of a bit tedious as far as, taking a lot of damage and not having anywhere to sort of refill and having to run that sort of gauntlet.
Yeah, that's kind of what made that level feel pretty tough.
Right. But I don't know. How did you other guys play that level?
Yeah, I think I did exactly what you did. Just take out the guys you don't need and just get them out of the way.
So, one of the things we sort of alluded to is as we were texting each other back and forth, asking how to beat this folk, how to beat that folk, what to do with a certain folklore. The game actually implemented a certain feature that was kind of neat with the storybook, and you would collect pages throughout the game. And so I just wanted to maybe sort of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well,
Anyway.
I had to think about that one for a moment because the storybook often kind of gave you tips for like the final boss or for mini bosses, but there would always be fairies or those rebel guys right before the final boss, and they would it would always be that guy who says like, well, what do you want to know about? Mm-hmm. And I would always say, give me all the info on, the folklore at the end of this level. Sure. And it would, like, he wouldn't outright say it, but it was kind of like a riddle. And it would be like, well, this creature is afraid of fire and, something else. So then I knew I had to do a fire type and a lightning type, for example.
Yeah, but they wouldn't always give you all the information. It might tell you like one aspect of what to do. I think you really had to use the book in this game. Pam, I think you had mentioned something about it maybe on the forums. I can't remember about the storybook and your kind of thoughts on that.
Yeah, I liked the idea of the storybook, but I found a lot of the time, especially when it featured the smaller folk, it was hard to tell exactly which one they were, which one it was referring to. I mean, it was easier when they were the larger, more unique-looking ones, but it wasn't always clear exactly which folk I should be using. And I also found a lot of the time, like, I got probably not even half of the total pages, so I just missed a number of pages, so I didn't know which one to do.
Me too. Now because the storybook pages were sort of vague, or a lot of the monsters look so similar, I didn't really rely on it all that much.
Yeah, well, it was fairly easy from the beginning, and I thought the pages were very helpful from the beginning. But what would happen as you went to new levels, and the further you got in the game, they would sort of backtrack and pull folks from previous levels that you could use, right? And so that made it a little bit tougher sometimes because, and I think Stephen mentioned this at one point in our texting, was that they started reusing a lot of sprites. And so it was sort of hard sometimes, like with a reused sprite, as far as, okay, which one am I supposed to be using here? Because they look so alike. And then you would have to look at the drawing and try to figure out, okay, is it the one that does the ice? Is it the one that throws the sticky stuff? You really couldn't tell from the drawing sometimes. It was as much of a detective story going through the storybook as it was in the town of Doolin, oftentimes, I thought. But one of the things I did like about the game is that if you were to use a character, let's say, that had like an ice ability or something of that nature, oftentimes you wouldn't have to use the exact character that was in the storybook. You could use any of the previous characters that you had picked up with an ice ability and still do damage to the folk, which was kind of cool.
Like
as long as it was the same
important
sort of
thing was the element, not the folk itself, and it became easier to figure out what I needed to do once I realized that.
Yeah,
it was like an elemental rock, paper, scissors kind of system.
Yeah. I missed the folk pages of the book for the guy that was at the top of the tower, and I kept defeating that guy, but the door wouldn't open because you have to capture him in order to get that to open.
Who was at the top of the tower?
You're riding like the sort of the elevator up. It was a reused character.
It's like
was it those sort of like scythe, guys?
He's got the double swords.
He changes his appearance. Like he looks kind of normal, and then he turns like completely black.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You have to use two. On him to take him out.
Like fire and sleep or something. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Depending on if you're with Keats or if you're with Ellen. But that one gave me a lot of problems.
Yeah, I had to look that one up online actually. couldn't figure it out.
And
Although I found towards the end of the game, you could just really rely on those destroy types. They kind of were the ones that would take care of anything.
right. Except for boss fights, of course.
No,
Things
I'm
of that
thinking like the judge.
Uh-huh.
He just destroy type on the mirrors and then fire on the boss itself. I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah. All right. What else about the gameplay? I guess we kind of talked about the book, and the only thing that I'll say, just to kind of close it out about the storybook is, I like that there was a little. I like that it wasn't exactly spelled out. I think that would have been a little bit too easy, and I liked the artwork in the book. I thought it was nice. I liked that it was a little bit vague, but at the same time, I felt like it was a little too vague, just a touch, and I think that kind of hurt the game a bit in that regard. Again, just one of these features that the game is really trying to implement, and I thought it was cool, but I thought it could have probably been done a little bit better, just to make it a little easier to read. So, all right. So, anyway, we'll talk a little bit about, we mentioned that there was a difference between Ellen and Keats, and we mentioned Keats' power surge, which we talked about, but Ellen was able to collect cloaks. Did any of you guys find all the cloaks in the game? Did any of you try for that, to complete the game that way?
I didn't find all of them. Yeah.
No, I just got one.
But by the end of the game, I only had 3, and 2 of them were like mandatory story cloaks. The only one that I went out of my way to get was the one that's resilient to destroy types.
Is that the Battlefield
cloak? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That wasn't a quest.
That wasn't a side quest, yeah, and also because
Right.
it looks badass.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I saw some clues, within the game and the story of the game. It's like, well, there's a cloak in this part of the game. I didn't go about searching. The cloaks were cool. I like the different looks of the cloaks. I like the artwork. It was awesome. I would have liked to see more cloaks in the game. But I didn't feel like it was something I was going to go out of my way and do. I didn't. A lot of times I have this sort of completionist mentality, but really not with the cloaks. I don't know.
I almost feel like the game wasn't easy, but it wasn't tough enough that it was really worth getting the cloaks and using their buffs and debuffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't. That's not something I even paid attention to. Any of you, or did you just wear a cloak
Yeah, I
because you
just
like the
went
way
with
it looked?
whichever one I liked the most, like the appearance wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was no real strategy in using the cloaks. I don't
Except
know,
for the
in my
final
opinion.
cloak, which gave you half magic usage or something, or it sped up magic regeneration.
Right, yeah. And you just automatically get that for going into the last level.
Yeah.
So.
The only one I found that was optional was the one in Undersea City, and that's just because I was having such a problem with that eel boss that I went around and tried to level up my folk a little bit more, and it just happened to be in one of the memory
Oh,
stones.
okay.
That's
that I
in that
opened
room
up.
with those slime guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how about the memory stones? Let's talk about the memory stones. How did you guys feel about those in the game? Do you like that? Did you had to use different folk to open them up?
I didn't know that different colors represented different elements, and that's only because the colored outline on your
your folk, the little avatar.
Yeah, it wasn't really pronounced. You're like, is this a red outline or is this a purple outline? And I found it tough to tell. So I stopped sorting my folks by level, and I started sorting them by element, and that made things a lot easier. So you knew if okay, there's a purple stone here, so I need to use a lightning guy. Silver ones were like anything. Green was wind and that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. You definitely did have to scroll through, and a lot of times if you would have like a set, oftentimes, I found myself in a level just having a set group of folks that I like to use and reuse, and certain ones that I was really comfortable with, and it kind of broke up the game for me a little bit, having to like switch those out just to open up one of those memory stones, and then have to switch it back.
It would have been nice if you could have kept that sort of roster of folks, because then that would be like your team, and it's kind of like an RPG. So you always, like in an RPG, you always have your team. So what folks would you always carry with you? I always had a shield type, and like for 99% of the game, I used Gaboy. Is that
same here?
That lightning guy?
That was a good one.
He was good. That electric shock was awesome, because that would it actually enacted sort of a stun, which was nice.
And then I think his name was Fomor, that sort of ogre troll type guy.
Yep.
So what about you guys?
I think it's interesting that you say you used a shield type for most of the game, because I didn't use one at all. So the entire game.
No. I used it like on a few bosses, the sort of the eyeball room, or the body parts room, if you will. I did use one in there because there was stuff kind of flying from all directions sometimes, so I found it useful. But other than that, I didn't really use a shield in the game. Pam?
I used a shield not until the end, like until maybe chapter 5 and onwards. I didn't use a shield, but then I used the sort of rainbow colored jelly guy. I'm not going to remember any of the names of the folks. So
yeah, the names are they're interesting, but yeah, I mean, there's no way we could go through. I mean, there's so many of them. I don't think I used the jelly guy. What did he do?
He just reduced the incoming damage. He'd stay active for a little bit.
So I actually used him for the eel. But the rest of the time, one of the golems that you could capture would give you a shield that deflected damage from all angles. So that one was a totally overpowered shield.
Was that the you talking about the? I know what you're talking about, the golem. I was thinking about the guy in the battlefield area, but that's not the one.
No,
he just kind of blocks from the front.
Yeah, no, not that. Yeah. Patriot or something like that. Right.
So we do remember some names. Good. Were there any types that you guys used a lot? I know, like I used usually typically the first folk you would capture would be sort of just like a basic attack folk, and I feel like I always had one of those, and that's what I used for probably 95% of the game.
Well, the very first folks you would run into, regardless of the level, were non-elemental. Right. So really, you could keep like that very first folk that you captured in the game, and like capture, the folks in the first room of the last level. So, which I guess it's good in a sense.
Right. Any
I just did shield, lightning, and destroy the whole time.
Okay. Pam?
I liked the destroy ones. I liked anything that could attack at range so that I didn't have to get too close to anything. Or the big guys that would sort of knock things away from you. I thought those guys were useful as well.
And that's a good point, because there were a lot of moments where you needed crowd control.
Yep. I think, other than like I used Gaboy as well, and that was one that always found its way into my inventory. But I found one that was from a quest. There was a rare one from a quest. It was like a walking bomb, and that one was pretty useful in some areas. It unfortunately it didn't do a lot of damage. You had to use it a lot, and it would take you a longer time to maybe clear a room, but it became sort of a safer way. I mean, I could just keep throwing it out, and before they would get up, I mean, it would just explode again. And, I found it a kind of a cheap but effective way to not take a lot of damage in the game, as I was going through a lot of levels. So, but good. I guess we should talk a little bit about the folk, and as far as there was another feature in this game where you could You could actually level up your folk if you wanted to. And instead of like some games where you have, like, if you just constantly use an item or something, it levels up, or a weapon. In this, you had to meet certain requirements to help level up the folk, and it might increase its attack power, it might increase or reduce the magic you have to use the folk, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could give them gems, or like, was it like sap or gold dust or something?
I don't know. Well, just all kinds of strange things that you would collect throughout the game.
Well, I didn't really do any of that, unless it was like, defeat X number of this certain type with that certain type.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I never really saw a really big need to power anything up. I think the only ones I would power up would be those beginning folks, with that normal sort of attack. If I could power those up in any way, since I use that about, like I said, 95% of the time, I would maybe, use some of the items, or it would say capture so many folks or destroy so many folks, and I would kind of, do that, but that's about it. I wouldn't go out of my way to collect like nuts or crystals or, whatever, dust, like you said. So anyone else?
I think very early in the game, I was really going out of the way. Like in chapter 1, I was going out of the way to, level up the folks. And I never felt like when they would level up, it made much of a difference. So I started ignoring that component of the game after a while. But yeah.
Well, your magic bar. Oh, I'm sorry, Pam. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say, I thought it was pretty unintuitive about how you level them. Having to destroy things with it, that I guess is okay, although I tended to absorb the ids rather than actually destroy most of the folks. So, and I also just there's so many folk, and they've all got 4 different ways that they can level up, and you can't really remember what you're supposed to be doing, if you're supposed to be killing it, or if you're supposed to be absorbing it, or you're supposed to be giving it an item. So it's just a lot to keep track of. And then also from a UI point of view, it was a little weird, because on the one page you had all of your items, but you couldn't use the items from that page. You had to go into the specific folk and then just see if that was the item that they needed.
Yeah, I think this game felt like you had to do a little bit too much research, if that makes sense. I mean, you had to stop gameplay so much. It kind of broke up the flow of the game to see, okay, how am I going to level this character up? Okay, I need to look at the book to see like how I'm going to defeat this next folk, or I need to swap my folks out. I need to research, need to see what I need for here at this part to open up this block. I don't know. It felt like there was so much of that going on. All very good like individual ideas, but too many small individual ideas tried to pack into one game. If that makes sense.
No, I'm glad you said that, because I felt the same way.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, it was kind of nuts. Did anybody, speaking of unnecessary things in the game, did anyone do any side questing?
I actually did. I got to a point, I was hitting my head on the wall with the boss before the eel boss, and I thought, when I was still not clear on the RPG elements and the powering up and how kind of unhelpful all of that stuff was, as we just discussed. I did all of the side quests I had available for Keats at the time. I did like 4 of them in a row. And I liked the side quest because you just went to the tavern, talked to the bartender. He gave it to you. You were immediately transported to whatever world they were in. You just did the side quest and were immediately transferred back. There was no traveling. It was almost like a fast travel thing, and you were just kind of put into this like segmented side quest, like a canned side quest. And I enjoyed that part of the game, actually.
Okay. And you could do them at night and during the day. You would get different quests at night and during the day, I think I should add.
Yeah, I only did a cluster of Keats's at night, so I don't know. I didn't experience doing ones during the day, so.
Okay. Now, if you were to, like, let's say, and I don't know, I'm asking you guys this, if you were to finish a chapter and you saw side quests in a previous chapter and you didn't finish them, could you go back and do them, or did you have to do them at the time inside the chapter?
I don't think so. I think once you reached a chapter, that side quest would unlock and it would stay.
Be there the whole time?
It would stay there the whole time until you did it, yeah.
Okay. And there was something else, too. There was something below that said, like, was it like a downloadable
There were downloadable quests, which I didn't even bother with.
No, I didn't even... Where would you get those from? I guess the store?
Probably PSN store,
Yeah,
maybe their
7-Eleven,
server, I don't know.
Well, hey, man, I don't know.
It's called downloading. That's when you get digital information from the internet onto your console, and you can play a game. And it's really weird. You don't get like a physical disc or anything.
They're not really collectible.
But the DLC was free for this game, wasn't it? Or am I parroting something that I incorrectly heard somewhere? I think there was like one of the episodes was free at least. So
okay, is it still available right now?
I didn't check either.
I didn't check in on it. Okay, because I didn't see anything when. I didn't even look. Honestly, let's be honest about it. I didn't even look. So, but all right. So, anyone else do any side questing other than Sean?
I didn't do a ton of them, just a small handful, but I think maybe one of you guys mentioned that some of these side quests actually add a little bit to the story. Did you guys see any like that? Because I didn't do any of those, I don't think.
Are you talking about Suzette's side quest?
I suppose.
Yes.
I'm not
Yes.
sure.
Yeah. There's some Suzette side quests toward the end that I actually did.
Because she's absent from the end of the game, and I guess that side quest explains why, right?
Yes, it does. It kind of gives you some other perspective into what was going on with her, and her story, which is interesting.
Well, since you're probably the only person who did her side quest, do you want to?
Don't get me to talk about it. I my memory is so bad. I know she ended up leaving the town. I know she blamed Ellen a lot for things that were going on, and I think she might have been involved in one of the murders.
I think she was. I think she was the person behind all the murders that occurred during the course of the game. So the doctor and the woman that was in the wheelchair. And that was my point of view. I never understood why she actually murdered those people. So maybe that's something the side quest explain.
Well, Ellen's mother murdered a lot of those people too, though, right?
Well, the people from in the past, like 17 years ago.
Right. And I think it explained a little bit of that. What was going on and why. I can't really recall. My memory's just not that good with the game.
What was Ellen's mother alive at the end of the game, or whenever Ellen and her mother kind of got reunited, or was that sort of like in some weird place where time doesn't exist or whatever?
It seemed to me like she was alive.
That's what I thought too.
And then she does actually die. While I was talking to her.
Yeah.
Was anyone else freaked out by that freaky deer head?
The pervy deer head.
Kept hitting on Ellen.
Yeah, that was bizarre. I don't know if that was necessary. But I guess we'll just kind of move on a little bit and we've talked about the folk, and there's also these characters known as Folklore, which is where the game gets its title. And these were basically your in-stage bosses, and you often had to use various folks to defeat them, and you would kind of figure out through the storybook if you got all the pages, or like Floyd said, from clues from some of the NPCs. Let's talk a little bit about the boss fights, and we can talk about them in general or individual, however you guys want to do it. Doesn't matter to me.
Well, so. Is it unanimous that everybody's least favorite is the Chapter 3 eel boss?
Yeah.
Definitely for me it was.
Same here.
Yeah.
I would have, if I hadn't agreed to be on the podcast, I would have quit the game right there.
Well, I'm glad we asked you before you forgot, before you quit. Yeah, it was extremely frustrating. For me, I mean, it took me a while. It was one of those things, and where I felt like it was like an older video game where you have to really learn the fight, because when the eel would come through, wherever it landed, it would go to the right. It would go one space to the right. It did that on 2 passes, and then on the 3rd pass, it would come through, and wherever it went through or passed you by, it would move 2 spots to the left.
Really? I didn't even notice that.
There was a pattern to it.
I always thought
there was a pattern.
It would go to, because the battlefield was a circle, I always thought it went to the diagonal across, hole or whatever, 3 times. And then, was it on the 3rd or on the 4th, it would come out and kind of just swim around for a bit, and that was your opportunity to attack.
Right. It was after the 3rd pass. As I said, like, he would come out of one hole and he'd go into another, and then he would end up facing, like, the first time, it would be one space to the right. I think it was to the right.
So it'd be like,
and then that way you could avoid and dodge. You knew where he was coming.
So it'd be straight
next.
Across and then one to the right. Okay.
Yeah, and then again that, and then the 3rd time he would move 2 to the left on that 3rd for that 3rd pass. But I guess my biggest thing was it wasn't so much the dodging. The fight was super long. My issue with that battle was the hitbox on the eel, and as far as cutting the tail and getting to that point where it would just kind of flop around and go insane.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what part of that fight did you guys have the most trouble with? For those of you who had trouble with it.
I had the same trouble. It took me 3 attempts before I even got a segment off it. I found that the hitbox was bad, and you couldn't lock onto it because you would lock onto its head, so that was pretty useless. Yeah. And I also felt like a lot of the time I would hit him with the lightning and think he was stunned, but he would just keep moving around anyway. So that got pretty annoying. And I also found the fact that it was such a long fight, so much time was spent with him just passing through without you really being able to do anything. So there's just all this downtime that wasn't challenging at all, and then when you finally got into it, I just found having to repeat that over and over after having died got pretty irritating.
Yeah. And it was sort of the only boss that was like that in the game, like you said, with the the super long lapse of time.
I mean, there was the judge, but he wasn't even that long.
No, I didn't think there was. I don't think there were any lapses in that battle. I didn't feel that way.
Just the mirrors.
Just the mirrors a little bit.
I guess, you hit them, but that's about it. But you always had something to attack. I mean, there wasn't any point where you were in a lull of having nothing to attack.
I think a couple times in that fight, he would actually drain your power, so you couldn't attack.
Yep.
Yeah.
Judge, yes.
Which was pretty annoying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it didn't last very long.
And one thing...
And it was more engaging.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
It was more engaging because he was like firing firebolts or whatever it was at you, so you actually had to move around and dodge, whereas the snake, you didn't really have to move much. It was a pretty predictable pattern. Yeah,
I failed several times at the judge fight, probably 2-3 times. I probably failed that fight before I was able to beat it, but at no point was I ever discouraged. Or got angry. I'm like, okay, I'll just go back. I can do it again. I think the only irritating thing was getting through all the dialogue, through that part and having to fast forward through all that. But I think you could push like start or something like that, and it would automatically like kind of get you closer to the fight. But yeah, I mean, I felt that was a pretty fun fight. I actually enjoyed that boss battle.
Yeah, I think that was one of the better ones.
But yeah. It was really cool. Kind of a big turning point in the game, too.
I liked the idea of the Warcadia boss. Because he had that fuel tank on the back.
Yeah.
Which he had to sort of set that on fire until it exploded. And then break down his shields. And then pummel the head, which I thought that was an interesting strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess my only problem with that one was using that cannon. I didn't like having to use the cannon for that fight just because it was so...
I would miss a
to,
lot.
like, sit it beside the legs.
I would miss a
Yeah.
lot with the cannon.
Yeah. No, that was a little bit aggravating. Some of their choices as far as which folk to use for some of the battles. But I did like that boss fight. I thought it looked really cool. It really fit with the area very well. It was really a really neat folk. So, not sure that I enjoyed fighting every folklore twice in the game, as we've already mentioned. But for those of you who've never played this game, you have to fight everyone twice. And I guess one of the things they tried to do was they tried to say, hey, if you're going to have to fight them 2 times, we'll make it to where you use different folk to battle them with, and change it up that way. But
at least it was somewhat interesting in that sense.
I didn't feel like that was enough. Right.
But yeah, like I agree,
That
it wasn't enough.
Probably the biggest downer for the game for me.
There wasn't enough variation when you would have to go replay that level.
Yeah. I don't know, and maybe it's just me, but I sort of felt like this game could have been better had they just said play as one or the other character and had a little more replay value. If you could come, okay, well, I played the game with Keats, now I want to get the other side of the story, I'm going to play with Ellen.
So kind of,
and done it maybe that way.
So kind of like beat the game with Ellen, you get an ending. Beat the game with Keats, you get another ending, and then by the time like the game will know you've beaten it the second time with the other character, you'd get like the true, quote unquote, true ending kind of thing. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Or if there were things that were left out, you could sort of, at least by playing through both sides, you could it would sort of meld, or you could kind of piece it together.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking it would be good if they traveled together. Like if they both went through, and then you could maybe switch at the save points or whatever if you wanted to.
Yeah, swap them out.
But,
Which is kind of how the final 2 chapters play, I think, or at least the last chapter. You can sort of switch between the 2 characters well, maybe not on the fly, but you can talk to the other character and say, like, okay, I'll take over from here or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, that was a little bit better, and kind of a neat way that they did that. And you're kind of like, wow, maybe they should have done this the entire game.
I was going to say,
I
was going to say that because they had that at the end, perhaps it was a concept that was considered, and then just this game has a really weird I guess development of so many ideas that are potential ideas that are not used.
Right. And one of the things I liked, just to get back to sort of the boss fights and stuff, in relation to what we were just talking about, I really liked the Scarecrow battle was broken down into Keats first, Ellen second. You know what I mean? But it was 2 totally different battles, completely different. I felt like if they would have done that for all of the folks, or all of the folklore, it would have made the game much better in that sense, and it wouldn't have felt so repetitive. Just sort of, like Pam said, sort of switching it out, but being able to sort of the tag team those battles in different ways would have made it far more interesting to me and more enjoyable. I think. I don't know.
That's a really good point. And I my only speculation as to why that is I don't know if I want to save it for later when we talk about if this is a hidden gem or not. But to me, this felt like a PS2 game. There's so much PS2-ness about it.
Right.
And so maybe at the end, Sony or whatever, like the publishing companies were saying, like, okay, get this thing out. We got new hardware coming out, so you put it on PS3 or whatever. Get this product out the door. So they just said, okay, now you're gonna switch characters and you're gonna play with somebody else.
All right, yeah, and here, while you're at it, throwing these motion controls that are new to this new system. Yeah, I could definitely see that, because it is an early game on PS3, so I could definitely see that happening. I mean, this, of course, is all speculation on our part, but a lot of times that's the reasoning for things being either overdone or underdone, right? So, any favorite boss fights? Did anybody have a favorite one that maybe they enjoyed the most or found the most interesting?
I don't know if I'd call it my favorite, but I think the most bizarre was the Chapter 4 boss. That's the
Which one
one
was
in
that?
the endless corridor. It's just like the big mouth with the eyes
Oh,
on the walls.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I like that one.
I
like that one
did
a lot
like it.
too.
I liked it too. It's just.
Yeah.
I found it very unsettling to look at, though.
Well,
That's-
the whole of the endless corridor was very unsettling because I think the endless corridor is. I don't know how it was Levaine's home base. That didn't quite make sense to me, but it was supposed to represent like where people go when they don't believe in an afterlife or something.
Yeah, it was odd. That boss battle was strange. It was like fighting a Salvador Dali painting or something.
Oh, that's a cool analogy. I like it.
How about the rest of you? Any favorite folklore battles? Pam?
I like the Endless Corridor one as well, and I really liked the Judge.
Yeah, I like the Judge as well. Yeah, I guess with the Endless Corridor, it was kind of nice because that was Chapter 4. After Chapter 3 was so tough, that one seemed a lot easier. It wasn't easy. I don't want to say it was easy. It was still a little difficult, but it took some of the pressure off, and I didn't feel like, because after 3, I was like, I'm never going to finish this game if these battles are like this, but it kind of alleviated some of that pressure. How about you, Sean? Any favorite battles during this one?
Well, the ones I got, the eel guy was my favorite. I mean, no, I kind of like the Wartopia one, but the Wartopia boss, as interesting and cool, like I agree with what Floyd was saying, kind of fell victim, and the boss battles that I went through in general fell victim to all the game's mechanical shortcomings. Like as frustrated as I was in the minute-to-minute gameplay of the camera and the controls and everything else, those things were just exacerbated tenfold when you got to a boss battle. And I want to bring up one of my biggest gripes with the game is that there are no healing items in this game. And
yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah,
I can't wrap my head around this. I would have been able to beat the eel boss. I would have had a much easier time with the Wartopia boss. I don't know why that was omitted. I don't think it would have made the game too easy or anything. You could have made them like very limited, or only give like a quarter of your life bar back. It didn't have to be like full on heal, like total heal items, but just something just to help a little bit. Because
there are healing items in the
life
game,
drops or whatever they're called.
No,
Yeah, you mean
I'm saying
usable
something you
healing
have
items.
in your inventory.
Yeah.
Because you can't.
Right,
there's
right.
nothing in a boss battle that you can.
You can't like stock up on potions.
Right, exactly. There's nothing like that. So once you're in a boss battle, you're on your own, and that was to me that's what made it, impossible for me. But yeah, I think that the Wartopia boss, out of the ones that I did and got to, I like that one, despite the major, mechanical shortcomings.
In kind of the opposite of what you were kind of saying, I think the game. It would have been nice to have some healing items, but I think the game does a pretty decent job of, right before fighting a boss, like having like, some of those stones maybe to break, or
You have a save point right before the boss.
Folks that drop healing points or save points, like Floyd said. I think the game does a decent job in making sure that you're, if not full, almost full of health before you enter that last battle, and it kind of makes you say, okay, well, you gotta make do with this,
Right.
So I did like that about the game. I thought that they did take that in consideration for a game to not have, like usable items. I think they did a pretty good job of making sure that you had enough health when you fought those bosses. So, it would have been nice, but I can definitely see your gripe to that point. It would have been really nice to have that for sure. Right, so we've got Pam on the show. Just took a little break, and we decided, a few of us kind of got together and decided to make the show a little more interesting after our break. What we might do is we have guests on, ask them a few questions, basically the same questions each time they come on the show, or each time we have a guest on the show, just to know a little bit more about them and kind of give a little break in the action from talking about our game. So, all right, you ready, Pam?
I'm ready.
All right. So your first question is, what is your favorite video game?
My favorite video game is Planescape Torment, which is a PC RPG.
I'm very familiar with that game. I have not played it, but I sent a copy to Bill. I found a copy at a Goodwill around here and sent it to him recently. So, okay.
Oh, yeah, I think I saw you posted the picture on Twitter. That's actually the only PC game that I still have the discs for.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think I have all of my World of Warcraft disc, and I have Diablo. So, yeah, you and I have talked, I think, a few times about the World of Warcraft addiction. So,
yes.
We'll just leave it at that. All right. Question number 2. What is the worst video game you've ever played?
I used to be a tester. I used to be in QA for a company in Toronto, and they made budget titles. Most of them were just budget military shooters. And there's one particular one called World War II Combat Iwo Jima. And it was a bad game. It was your generic military shooter on a low budget. And something happened during development where we were getting builds on like a bi-weekly basis rather than on a daily basis. So I would just have to play this game over and over and over, the same build of it for weeks. So that's the worst game I've ever played.
Maybe not the worst game you've ever played, but you've had to play it so many times it became the worst game you've ever played.
And the most broken game you ever played.
Yeah.
All right. What feature or gameplay aspect is the most essential for your enjoyment of a video game?
Oh, it's sort of a toss-up. I mean, I'm definitely into narrative and having a good story, but bad controls can also really just turn me completely off a game. So it's sort of a toss-up between narrative and controls, which are completely opposite ends of the spectrum. But I think I need both.
All right. If you could be any video game character, who would it be and why?
I would be Jade from Beyond Good and Evil.
Okay.
She knows how to kick ass, and she's a photographer. She also takes care of kids, and I don't really want to do that part. But if I could go take pictures of wildlife and unveil government conspiracies, that would be good.
All right. Great answer. All right. If you had to sell off a specific console you own and all of its games, what would it be? If you had to sell off one set.
I'm trying to see what would make Will the least mad.
I was going to say you can't sell his games. No.
I was going to say Saturn, but he's going for the full set of that. But in terms of reclaiming the most space in my living room, I would sell the Genesis and all of its games.
Oh.
Good choice.
That hurts.
Yeah, that really hurts Rich. He really loves his phone.
I know. I've gotten into it in the last year or so. I love it. All right.
I like it too. It's just there's so many of them.
I understand. Okay, so what console and all of its games that you own would be last to go if you had to ever get rid of them? So sort of the opposite.
PlayStation 2.
Hell
okay.
Yeah. This is the best guest we've ever had on the show.
All right.
Let's see. If you had to give up collecting video games, what hobby would you most likely take up?
I am not that huge of a collector.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have everything that I want already, so I would just continue to play the video games I have and make videos and stuff.
Okay. All right. If you could choose any celebrity to hang out with for an evening, who would it be and what would you guys do?
I would hang out with Gillian Anderson because I love her.
Yes.
What would we do? Nice dinner, I guess.
Okay.
Lots of wine.
Lots of wine with Gillian Anderson. Sounds great.
X-Files
All right,
Gillian
that's
Anderson
it.
or Hannibal Gillian Anderson?
X-Files.
Okay.
Okay.
Or what's the other one? The BBC one she was in. Can't think of the name right now.
Oh, no. I know the one you're talking about.
I do too. I think I just watched. You talking about the murder mystery show?
Yeah,
Oh my god. Not The Fall.
Yeah.
Is that it?
The Fall. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's a great show. If anyone hasn't seen it, please watch it. And yeah, Gillian Anderson. Yeah, to me, she's gotten so much more attractive with age. I don't know what it is. People disagree with me all the time for that, but yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, I love her. I think she's gotten better with age too. She
Yeah.
just keeps
Her acting's
getting
gotten
hotter.
better too. Yeah, even better. So, all right, well, let's get back to Folklore. Finish this up. I know Sean's getting antsy over there.
I want to go
So-
home.
For those who don't know, Sean is moving right now, and basically nothing is left but a desk and computer, and so he is sitting in a strange room of an apartment that he's moving out
Yeah,
of.
just complete emptiness, alone. Just like my life in general.
Before we sort of move on to areas, let's talk about the final boss. We talked about the bosses a little bit. But we didn't talk about the final boss, and there's sort of a big revelation of you've made it this far, but Scarecrow becomes sort of the final boss in the game, which is kind of odd. Didn't really see that coming. But he gets sort of twisted by power and not happy with Ellen's decision, so kind of morphs into this giant, strange raven character, if you will. So, what did you guys think about the final boss fight?
I thought the Keats battle with Scarecrow was really easy. And the Ellen one was almost my rage quit moment.
Really?
'Cause I think
That close to the end?
yeah, I know. What was it? Because he disables a lot of your folks.
Uh-huh.
So you have a
Yeah,
really
with
limited
Keats.
sort of stock of guys that you can use, and because I had gotten so used to a certain set, it was definitely a curveball that was thrown at me that I had to adapt to.
Yeah. But I think you get that final book all at one time, don't you? Is my memory wrong about that?
I'm not sure. I didn't check
For the
I
final
didn't check
boss.
the storybook for him.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. Yeah, he's in
There's
there.
there's an NPC who says, like, there's a boss at the end of here that's gonna disable a lot of your folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. Any others? Pam, what did you think about the final boss?
I feel the same way. The Keats part was pretty easy. The Ellen part was much harder. I also found switching between the folk irritating, especially, I don't know if anyone else had this sort of performance problem, but after I exited the folk menu, the game would sort of freeze for a couple seconds.
I think I had that
So-
throughout like the whole
Yeah.
game whenever I
Yeah.
came out of the folk
Yeah.
menu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't really like having to switch within a battle. And I also have a problem just being extremely offensive and not being careful. So I had to try it a couple times, and I finally learned I had to sort of pull back sometimes and let them do their attacks and before I got in. But I did find that the one side of the boss, the right side facing him, there was this sort of safe spot right sort of in the corner around the side of him, whereas
Yeah,
there was
was.
no safe spot on the left.
Okay. Huh. Interesting. Steven?
I think my biggest problem with it was that, like we all said, the Keats fight was pretty easy, but the Ellen fight was a little harder. But if you got a game over during the Ellen fight, you had to do both fights again, which was really annoying.
Yeah.
That was a pain.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think my experience is very similar to Pam's. I tend to rush in, and you can't really do that with this boss. You really have to kind of hang back and play a little more defensively. But yeah, other than that, it was a pretty cool fight. I actually had forgotten that it disables a lot of your folks at the beginning of the fight, but I think as you sort of progress through it, you get some of them back little by little. But it's an interesting fight.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. It's probably one of my favorite fights in the game. I had more trouble with, if you can believe it, I had more trouble with Levain than I did with Scarecrow. I don't know. I almost rage quit at Levain. I was so frustrated because I knew I was so close to the end, and it's, when you're so close, that's when it gets even more frustrating. And I probably had to do that fight like 7 times. Wow. And the worst part is you have to run through the entire level to get back to that battle. And there are some rooms that will not, there'll be barriers.
You have to clear the room first, and then
you do, and so that was very time consuming and annoying for me. But with Scarecrow, I actually beat it the first time. I
really?
I don't know. Yeah,
good for you.
I use the book, and unlike
I thought the Fairy Lord was really hard. I think he took like 3 tries.
He took me a few times, and he took me a few times.
Hard too.
And
he took me a few times. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
He also, when you're fighting folk, you can tell when you're damaging them because their id pops out, whereas with the Fairy Lord and Levain, you couldn't really tell if what you were doing was effective.
Yeah, you just have to wail on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a little trouble with the Fairy Lord fight, and I think I texted the guys, and I was like, I'm having a little trouble with that. They're like, well, just focus on him. And once I was, like, super offensive, then it was an easy fight. He went down really quick. I tend to play... my play style is a little different from. I know you guys were talking about you're more offensive when you play. I tend to be a little more methodical and defensive when I play games, and kind of take it kind of slow. I'm not overly aggressive. Kind of take it slow and kind of let it open up and kind of watch it. And I think that probably is the reason I had a lot of problems with Levain and with the Fairy Lord. Whereas with Scarecrow, I could kind of sit back and kind of watch it sort of unravel and dodge from a distance and kind of see like how the fight was going to progress.
That's usually how I am too. Except for when I get really into it, then I kind of forget about hanging back and being a little more defensive and more methodical. So that's where a lot of my game overs came from. But I mean, like for the Fairy Lord, I didn't even. Once I kind of figured out my strategy, I didn't bother with his summons, which is something that I would normally do, is kind of take out the henchman first, and then...
That's what I did, yeah.
But that was a total waste of time and waste of effort, because he would resummon them, and it's kind of like he didn't make any progress at all. So once I just locked onto the Fairy Lord and, did that thing, it was much, much easier.
Right.
During the Fairy Lord fight, I learned that if your controller dies, the game doesn't auto-pause.
That's really cool.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so that's why I died the first time on Fairy Lord.
Let's see. Let's move on now. We'll talk a little bit about the areas, probably just sort of briefly. I'm not sure who brought this up earlier, but the whole idea of these different realms and different worlds were sort of based on manifestations of human ideas. And I thought that was a really neat way to present these different worlds. And I can't remember what was associated with what. I mean, I know like Warcadia was,
people who died in war, basically.
Yeah.
Right. And, man's manifestation of death and war and stuff like that. I can't remember any of the other ones, but let's talk about that.
I think Fairy Realm was just like the happy-go-lucky kind of afterlife.
Right.
The underwater city was forgotten civilizations kind of thing, like Atlantis kind of thing.
Sure, sure.
And what did you have after that? Endless Corridor was like non-believers or kind of people who don't believe in an afterlife.
Area, right. And then, of course, Hell Realm was
pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah. Right. Which was one of my favorite areas. I mean, as far as visually, I mean, gosh, it was so beautiful. The running streams and things of that nature. They really put a lot of detail into that area. It was really cool. But any favorite areas that any of you guys enjoyed?
Endless Corridor, just for the concept of it.
Sure.
I remember the Fairy Realm being very appealing to me at first. It's just a very beautiful area, very lush, and that's the first chapter of the game, and it kind of set a tone for the game, and going from Fairy Realm to Warcadia for me was such a letdown, actually. Yeah, it was very jarring. I just didn't find Warcadia appealing at all. So it was kind of a letdown going from one to the other.
And you really like it when you start a game in really vibrant, lush, colorful levels.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it would have been better placed toward the end of the game, if that makes more sense. As far as like, more toward hell, and when things start breaking down, and use some of the, the more vibrant levels at the beginning of the game. But I agree. I mean, I think if Fairy Realm wasn't the first area, I don't think the game would have really appealed to me as much.
If I could have restructured anything, it would be Fairy Realm, Underwater City, Warcadia, Endless Corridor, and then Hell Realm. That would be my ideal layout.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we should maybe sort of wrap things up and talk about sort of our final thoughts on the game. Steven, you wanna wrap us up on that?
Yeah, for me, the game started off very strong, and I just thought this was going to be an excellent game, and they start introducing a lot of strange mechanics. There's some weird design decisions in the game, and I felt like the game was kind of a missed opportunity. Just didn't live up quite to its potential. We talked about, does this game qualify as a hidden gem? And I think for me personally, I'd probably say no. Just doesn't quite hit that mark. If I had to score it, I'd probably give it about between a 5 and a 6 or so. Maybe the good slightly outweighing the bad for me. But yeah, I think it's kind of a shame that it was kind of bogged down by some of the strange design choices.
So now knowing that, are you happy with your choice, and sort of what made you pick this game? Sort of a 2-part question for that one.
Well, part of it, I know it was just a game I never played before, and it looked very interesting. And if you remember, I actually presented you guys with a list, and everybody seemed to be in favor of Folklore. Mm-hmm. So that's what we went with. Yep. And I mean, I'm glad to have played it, sure. It didn't get a lot of action on the forums, not a lot of participation, but it's overall I did enjoy the game, but I just think it could have been much better.
Pam, your closing thoughts on the game and whether you think this is a hidden gem?
I feel pretty much exactly the same. I thought the game started off good. I thought it had some interesting ideas. I liked at first the dual protagonist thing, but yeah, after a while it did start to get repetitive, and all of the little bad design choices and the sort of UI things that bothered me started to add up, and then that eel boss just pushed me over the edge. So after that, I was just like, all right, just power through, get it done. I didn't do any side quests or anything. So, it was an interesting game, and I like that they tried something a little new, but I don't think that they pulled it off.
Okay. How about you, Sean?
So I was so excited to play this game, actually. I should say hello to my friend Matt back in New Jersey. He wasn't a big collector, and he was the kind of person, like, when he was done with a game, he would just give it to me if he didn't want it or if it wasn't like super valuable or something. And I actually knew he had this game, and I bugged him for a while to like play it and then give it to me because I wanted it in my collection. Being a fan of Sony and PS3, I thought a hidden gem, quote unquote, like this, I needed it in my collection. And when it got chosen for the playthrough, I was super excited, and especially for the reasons Steven stated that at the beginning of the show, that we're just constantly going over and playing the same third-person shooter formula again and again, and just complaining about it on the podcast. Especially me. I'm speaking for myself at this point, but to play something totally different. And I will say, like, in my first hour or two of playing the game, I was really blown away by everything, and I thought I was in for like a real treat. I as soon as I started playing, I went right on Twitter and I went right on the forum to say, like, yo, check this game out. It's great. Mm-hmm. And man, it just turned out to be like so disappointing on, mechanical and technical levels, and then, just the frustration of the bosses, and ultimately just not being able to pass a certain point, which it really breaks my heart. I wish I could have completed the game to participate more in this discussion a little bit more. And to be completely honest and full disclosure here, it was offered to me by you guys to sit this one out, but I really didn't want to pass up an opportunity to be on the air with Pam, because I'm a huge fan of her work. So that's like kind of why I'm here, just on this episode. But yeah, that's my lasting impression is just like an initial thrill of, wow, this game looks great. It seems so interesting. It's like Silent Hill meets Pokemon. It's crazy. I love it. And then to have that like crushing disappointment of, it's like the camera's broken, the controls are kind of messed up, and I can't beat this freaking eel. I'm done.
Yeah. I was sort of waiting. If listeners of the show will know that Sean has a typical evolution in gaming when we play these playthroughs of, this is awesome, this sucks, and then like a total turnaround of, I enjoyed playing this game. He did not make it to the third stage of this game.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I'm not going to argue with that at all. That's pretty much what happened.
Yeah. So do you have any interest in going back to this and trying to finish, or was the clunkiness and the third level boss just left too much of a bad taste in your mouth to want to go back?
Yeah, I doubt I'll go back. And I guess we should throw out the other major title from Game Republic was Magine and the Forsaken Kingdom. Yep. And I've already tried playing that game, and I didn't really care for it. So that's the end of my games from Game Republic, So yeah, I'm not going to go back to it, I don't think.
Yeah. One of the it's funny you mentioned Magine and the Forsaken Kingdom. I own that as well. One of the things that with Folklore that I had this sort of feeling in playing it was I felt a little bit of a similarity between Shadow of the Colossus. And it's a completely different game as far as, Folklore has levels you go through and then you fight a Folklore. But the whole experience of like, why am I doing this? Why am I taking out this seemingly innocent guardian of this area? And something that is, and a lot of them weren't very like evil looking or aggressive. I felt I had that same sort of sense, and with the same thing with Magin and the Forsaken Kingdom, it appears to me that game is sort of like a how do I want to say it? It's sort of like The Last Guardian in a sense. You've got this big beast that follows you around and aids you and helps you figure out puzzles. But what I guess what better games to kind of allude to or sort of mimic the feelings of than those games. Though we don't know what Last Guardian's going to be like yet, right?
Let's keep our fingers crossed for this year.
Out at all.
I've got my pre-order, so they better not let me down.
But that's just something I sort of thought about when I was playing the game, and I wanted to share that. But as far as Folklore is concerned, as you know, my PS3, I got it not this past Christmas, but the Christmas before. I always, watch a lot of YouTube videos as far as like finding out hidden gems or games I should collect. I'm not going for a full set like I am for some of my other systems for PS3. So, I've just got, probably maybe 60 PS3 games. And I'm trying to go through and find out which games are kind of choice. And I did come across Folklore, and I've had it in my collection for some time. And when it came up on Sean's list, I was like, oh, that would be awesome. I've always heard that's
Steven.
Gosh, I do that with the S names all the time. You guys,
That's all good.
When it came up on Steven's list, I was like, yeah, that sounds like something I would really like to play. And I'd heard that it was a hidden gem. Is it a hidden gem? I think there's a lot going on with it that I don't really care for. I think, as we mentioned, they try to pack too much, tons of great ideas, but too many great ideas force-fed into one game. And that's my problem with it. I would rate it higher than Steven. I know you said like maybe a 6 over the top. I'd probably go like maybe a 7 or 7.5. I think I enjoyed it a good bit. And thought it was a fun game overall. I'm really glad I played it. I'm glad that we picked it for February, and I had a blast with it, to be honest. There were some problems with it, but I guess when you get to like a 7.5 out of 10, you almost have to say it is kind of a hidden gem. Maybe I would say it is, but again, I don't have a lot of experience on the PS3 yet, so maybe I'm completely off, but that's just sort of my opinion. So, Floyd?
I like this game, and I think it had a lot of good ideas. Now, a lot of those ideas weren't executed very well, and like you said, it's kind of was overly ambitious, but I kind of applaud that ambition. Mm-hmm. And, I think it's an idea that hasn't really been explored very much. And if it is like there are a lot of games about afterlives and mythology, and they're a lot darker and more evil. And so that this one kind of, went almost the other direction was an interesting take. Mm-hmm. For a 2007 PS3 game, I think it looked really good. It felt kind of PS2-ish to me, and I really liked the PS2, so that was a plus. It's definitely not the best game on the library for the PS3, but I'm happy I played it. If there is somebody who just picked up a console and they're looking for some, inexpensive but interesting or decent titles, I'd definitely give it a recommendation. And to give it a number score, I would say, yeah, a solid 7.
Yeah, okay. All right, awesome. Well, Floyd, while you're on, you want to go ahead and tell us about, tell everyone about what we're going to be playing next month.
So we're keeping things unconventional again next month, and we're playing it's not download only now, but for the longest time it was download only. This is going to be an interesting thing, and I'm really surprised at the turnout that we have already. We will be playing Life is Strange. That was made by Don't Nod, which is a French developer who previously made Remember Me. And this is a very story-driven, kind of like the modern point-and-click type thing. Same, I want to say almost, I don't know much about it yet, but just looking at it, same sort of idea as Telltale Walking Dead series. Branching storylines, character-driven, narrative-driven. It's available on Xbox 360, PS3, PC, PS4, Xbox One, as a collector's edition, which comes with a physical copy of the game, a CD soundtrack, and I think some bonus artwork.
All right. Awesome. And Pam, you're going to be joining us for that game, right?
Yeah, I'm going to take part. I've played the first episode a while back, so I'll give it a replay and play the rest.
Awesome. And I don't want to spoil anything, and I'm not going to tell you, but we have a very exciting and excitable guest on our next podcast. So we definitely want you guys to take a listen.
It's another Canadian.
Hint. All right.
Oh.
All right. But Pam, thanks so much for joining us. I will reiterate what Sean said, and that I'm a big fan of your work, and really enjoy your channel. And we're so glad that you could join us for this one.
Oh, I was glad to come. I had a lot of fun.
All right, and tell them where they can find you again.
You can find my YouTube channel. It is called Cannot Be Tamed. And if you're looking for me on Twitter, my name is @Jasyla_. That's JASYLA_.
All right. Thanks a lot.
And that concludes our discussion of Folklore and also this episode. Thanks again, Pam, for joining us. Listeners, remember to find Cannot Be Tamed on YouTube for more of her great work. In March, Floyd will be hosting the critically acclaimed narrative adventure game Life is Strange, which is available on 7th and 8th generation consoles as well as the PC. Log on to rfgeneration.com to join us. Thank you as always for listening, and we'll see you next time on the RF Generation PlayCast.